Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. So today we'd like to welcome Candace Shim to the show. Candace is the author of The Bully-Proof Blueprint, A Parent's Guide. Candace is a dedicated and experienced mental health professional with a passion for helping individuals navigate their emotional and psychological challenges. With 28 years of experience as a therapist, including 22 years as a school counselor, she brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to her practice. In addition to her role as a school counselor, Candace has a thriving private practice. So welcome to the show, Candace.
Thanks for having me, both of you, Brenda and Karen. It's so nice to see you and meet you. And by the way, I just got to say, you guys are doing amazing stuff. I was looking through a lot of your things and listening to your podcasts you've done before, and I'm really, really impressed by what you guys are doing. It's super important. So I love it. Shout out to you both.
Oh, thank you.
you.
Yeah, we try to hit topics that other people don't. So
no, I love it.
Yeah, so I already told you it's nice to meet you. So,
nice to meet you.
Yes. So if you can start out by telling us a little of your story and what led you up to writing your book.
Yeah, so you mentioned in the beginning, I've been a therapist for over 25 plus years all over. I've worked in the prison system. I did drug treatment. I ran a women's residential facility for pregnant women who are also addicted to drugs. And then for the last 22 years, I've been working with kids, mostly elementary school kids. And the one thing that comes up very common in all of my work between kids and adults is trauma, abuse, and bullying. I put right in there with that because when you start to talk about it, it's very similar. In fact, the biggest difference between bullying and abuse is your relation to the person who's doing the abuse or the bullying. Mm-hmm. So as a school counselor, I was often asked, what do we do? What should we do? How do we know? And so I just kind of had this idea and started working on it during COVID. And then just finally decided to be brave enough to put it out there for the world to see and judge. And that's kind of how we got where we're at.
Well, that's great because it's really, really needed. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even adult bullying. So still happens as we're adults. So.
Absolutely. I tell that to kids that I work with all the time. I said, bullying doesn't go away just because you leave school. There's adults that bully us and we have to learn how to, unfortunately, we have to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we haven't done a full podcast on bullying. We've talked about it a little bit here and there with different people, which is a form of abuse. So let's take a dive into your book. So from other podcasts, we know that most bullies are abuse victims. So let's start with chapter 1, unpacking bullying in our society. You say bullying is not just a problem for children, but there are bullies in the adult world as well, which we just said. I completely agree with that as I was just bullied as an adult, which I just said. Teaching the importance of standing up for themselves and their friends, building empathy, and developing self-confidence are necessary strategies for establishing a solid foundation of bully-proofing skills. By equipping our children with the skills to handle a variety of social skills confidently, we can provide our children with the tools to be successful in school and life. So what is bullying? And can you expound on chapter 1 and go over some of the statistics, please?
Oh, absolutely. So I believe, what you said, bullying at its core is abuse. Like I said earlier, the biggest difference is your relationship. If you are in an intimate relationship or a family relationship, they call it abuse. If it's just somebody you know socially at school or in the workplace, then it's bullying. Other than that, they're very, very similar. Bullying is a pattern of repeated, targeted abuse, most often with an imbalance of power of some sort. Either the bully is bigger, stronger, or has much more social power than the victim. And so they utilize that a lot in being able to bully and manipulate and in some ways terrorize the victim. The statistics are kind of scary. And I think a lot of people tend to think of bullying as just something that happens and everybody goes through it and it's no big deal and we all like get over it. But it really has lingering impacts.
It does.
Even like college kids, a research showed that like 23% of college kids reported being bullied in some way, either online or in school. And those are adults, they're kids, but those are adults. So it doesn't go away. A lot of kids who drop out or miss school, I think when you start looking at the statistics, it's pretty alarming. Oftentimes, suicide, attempts at suicide are a big part of that. There was like a study in the UK that found at least half of the like attempted suicides had something to do with bullying. And I just think it's not just, oh, they're just kids being kids. These are sometimes very big things and you carry these into life with you. And so it's something that we need to identify and address.
Yeah, I remember I was bullied in 7th grade and I'm still traumatized from it.
Yeah.
It was bad. I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's too long, but it was bad.
No, I believe we could all sit around a room and out with friends and bring up everybody at the table, no matter where they're at now in life, no matter how successful or whatever. They all have a story of being bullied in some way.
I believe everyone
you
has.
wouldn't think.
Yeah, I believe it's true that probably everyone's been bullied in some time, in their life. So in chapter 2, you talk about 5 different bullying types. Would you like to go over those?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it aligns a lot with abuse as well. Physical bullying is the one that most everybody kind of thinks of. And that's the pushing, shoving, fighting, beating somebody up for their lunch money or whatever. That is, definitely still a thing, but it's not the only bullying that happens. Cyberbullying is one of the big things. And, I talk about this a little bit in the book. It's rapidly becoming a very big and impactful form of bullying where it's done online. Mostly because it's very consistent, persistent, and you never escape it. It like follows you home. Whereas what happens at school can kind of stay at school, but when it's online, it just follows you everywhere. Verbal bullying, which is name calling, hurtful things, hurtful words, threatening. Social bullying is another one that we see a rise on, and that's just the gossiping, intentional exclusion of somebody from a group, getting other people to exclude that person from the group, making them feel bad socially and getting others to join in. And then what I call like sexual bullying, which is basically sexual harassment, but the constant saying things that make somebody uncomfortable, commenting on their body, harassing them at school, harassing them online, asking for inappropriate pictures to be sent. These are things that we think of as adult problems, but these are things that kids deal with also.
Oh. Well, also in chapter 2, you explain what makes bullying stand out over being unkind. So it's bullying versus being unkind. So number 1, the intent of bullying is to harm, control, or dominate the target. It is premeditated and involves a desire to cause pain or distress to someone who is perceived weaker or more vulnerable. Number 2 is frequency. Bullying is characterized by its repetitive nature. It involves repeated acts of aggression or hostility towards the same individual or group over time, creating a pattern of abuse. Number 3 is power imbalance. The bully has more physical strength, social status, or other forms of power over the victim, sometimes money. The victim has a hard time defending themselves. Number 4 is impact. Bullying has a more profound impact. It can lead to significant emotional, psychological, and sometimes physical harm. And number 5 is social dynamics. Often occurs within a social context where the bully may gain support and approval from others where the victim is isolated or in a group activity.
Can you briefly go over the appropriate 7 responses and intervention?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use the word unkind mostly because that's, from the nature of being 22 years talking to like little kids. But I think of it's also mean behavior. And I think one of the biggest things that I deal with as a counselor oftentimes is trying to help decide what's bullying versus what's just mean. And sometimes we can have drama and conflict and there's a mean person, but the other parts of the bullying aren't there. There isn't a power imbalance, or it's not necessarily repetitive, or there's not a target. The person's just grouchy and mean to everybody. And then, those are people you handle differently than a bully who's going after somebody to intentionally cause this harm. So how we respond is important, because if we respond to all of it the same way, it can have other unintended consequences. If somebody is being mean, they're going through whatever, they're having a rough time, there's a little bit of drama, and we identify that individual as a bully and treat them as a bully, there's consequences that go with that last a long time, as well as the person now thinking there's something wrong with them. But also for the victim, if you're constantly telling them that they're being bullied, then they start to kind of feel powerless against being able to defend themselves. Because sometimes we feel like bullying is this great big thing where if I just need to tell walk away from my friend and go get new friends, I have power over that. But I don't always feel like I have power over being bullied. So I think the response we have is very important to be able to know which one are we dealing with. A bullying situation needs to be addressed, and interventions need to happen for both the victim and the bully. Whereas if it's just meanness or unkind or a misunderstanding, you can do a peer conflict resolution. That's going to be helpful, but you can't really do a peer conflict resolution when there's an imbalance of power, because it's going to be very hard for the victim to face their bully in that way, because they know there's going to be other consequences for them.
Mm-hmm.
Having the education to know what it is and how to prevent it is important. Being able to identify and prevent the bullying, teaching the staff in a school or the kids, or even coaches on an athletic field or leaders in a church, whoever has kids, because I think we always think of bullying happening in school, but it also happens other places. It happens any place you've got a bunch of kids gathering together, you could have that situation. So teaching those people what to look for is very important so that they can determine, is this bullying or is this just kind of some drama that's happening? And I think that is, an important part of being able to address it. Being able to have support for the victim. If it's a bully situation, the victim's going to need some support. The bully will too, but the victim needs somebody following them up, making sure they're okay, making sure that whatever the adults in charge have put into place is actually happening. And if they feel safe, educating everybody involved, again, like I said, I think understanding the difference between the two, what is mean and what is absolutely bullying and targeted behavior. And then accountability. Bullies need to be held accountable for what they're doing and called to task. And there needs to be something put into place so that it stops, as well as whatever happens, the other people who are involved, the bystanders, the victim, whoever, also need to know that something happened so that they can feel safe as you work through the person getting help and learning how to socialize, and oftentimes just learning to manage their emotions a little bit better and handle their feelings. And again, the long-term impact. Mislabeling that behavior can cause a lot of unintended consequences, but also mislabeling bullying behavior as just mean and drama and kids being kids also has long-term consequences, because if someone keeps telling you you're not being bullied and that's not what's happening, then you start to believe that maybe it is just you and maybe this is what you deserve. And I think that can have some significant impacts.
Yeah, so chapter 3 talks about the vulnerable playgrounds and the youth who are targeted. You talk about the 5 types of traits victims of bullying usually have. I'm really interested to hear this. So can you go over these traits?
Yeah, so I think that in bully situations, I attribute this to any kind of almost criminal situations. If someone's going to mug you, they're looking for a particular person to go after, someone who's by themselves, doesn't look like they're going to fight back, a dark area. There's certain situations they need to have. And I think the same is true when it comes to bully situations. They're looking for a child or a teen who's vulnerable, the new kid, the one who doesn't have friends, the one whose friends are all gone that day, for an opportunity, because, you're going to go for what's easy. You're not going to make it hard for yourself. Oftentimes kids or teens that have low self-esteem, who are struggling themselves either through something happening at home or whatever, people can pick up on that. And bullies, even young bullies, can pick up on someone who already doesn't feel like they're confident and doesn't carry themselves confidently. And they can pick up on that and kind of target that and make it worse. Feed into that by using the bullying tactics and being mean and being unkind and using social isolation. Difficulty with peers is a really hard one when a child struggles with their own emotional management and regulation. They don't understand social cues. They have a hard time understanding their peers. Maybe they're a little younger than their peers, whatever it is. It's going to stand out because that child doesn't have as many protective factors and friends on their side. So it puts them at a little more risk. And then unfortunately, anything that makes you different. And in fact, children who are diagnosed with disabilities, whether physical or intellectual disabilities, that they're 2 to 3 times more likely to be bullied than their non-disabled peers. And that's a very sad statistic. And I hate that. But, unfortunately, that is what all the studies show. And that's because it's easy to go after somebody that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was born with a deformity on my right foot, and no one in my family had one. So I wasn't bullied, but I was made fun of a lot. And it stays with you.
Yeah, it sticks with you. I mean, 63% of girls report being like teased, picked on, not necessarily bullying, but about their body size. And it's not always about being large. They pick on you because you're tiny, or you're too petite, or then you're too tall, or you're too this, or you're too that. And girls take that to heart. Those are things you can't help. So then you start to think there's something wrong with you. And then that impacts self-esteem and everything else.
Yeah.
I could see how certain kids would be set up for bullying based on how their home life is going, or, how they already feel about themselves. Like you were saying, they pick up on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had no self-confidence at all. And I think that's why I got bullied in 7th grade. And my mom had put me into this, I forget what it was called, but I did some modeling, but there was a class you took before to help you with your confidence. And so people were picking up on that. It helped a lot. It did help a lot.
Well, a lot of times even just picking up on, again, it's just whatever makes you different. And it can be a great thing that makes you different. Kids that are really great at singing or whatever, and they're brave enough to get out there and try out for the play. And then other kids use that as a thing to start kind of cutting them down and saying, getting in their head. And it's tough.
Yeah. So in chapter 4 is titled The Bullying Alert, Signs You Shouldn't Ignore. You say there are numerous signs your child might be a target of a bully that you can't ignore. Can you go over those signs?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these aren't always like, if they have this is what's going on. But it's certainly, if you see these are questions you should kind of ask and watch and try and see what's going on. Physical marks that don't really make a lot of sense, or that you don't know where they came from. That's a big one. Bruises on the arms, the legs, pinch marks, those kinds of things. Things that are related to school avoidance, not wanting to go to school, especially if you have a child who was great going to school and then all of a sudden they don't want to go to school and there really isn't a reason that you can see. Same goes for the bus. All of a sudden they don't want to take the bus. They don't want to be at the bus stop by themselves. They don't want to be dropped off. They don't want to be alone with their peers, either at the bus or on the walk to or from school, when you think that they would have liked that. Frequent trips to the nurse. I know the nurses at both of the schools I've worked at, they're really great at picking up on what's really something that is a health issue and what's probably anxiety or something else going on. And they'll usually call me in to be like, can you talk to this child and see what's happening? Because this is the 3rd stomach ache they've had in 2 days. Something isn't right.
Yeah.
Sudden changes in their mood, changes in their personality. Those are always big red flags. And one thing is like being accused of bullying. When you're like, but that's not my child. A lot of bullies can be very good social manipulators, and they manipulate a situation where it's another person. It's the victim who actually gets in trouble for the bullying because they're attempting to fight back or make a comment back, and they're the one that gets kind of caught or heard. So looking into like, what is happening? Why would, my child be accused of bullying? That's one of the things to look at. And then a sudden and drastic change of friends. People they've always hung out with, they don't want to hang out with anymore, or you don't see them coming around anymore. Those would be just red flags that something is going on and it probably needs some investigation.
Wow, you're really bringing back a lot of memories, because in 9th grade, I didn't realize that was a form of bullying, but I had my best friend just one day just decided she wanted to be my friend anymore and just excluded me from everyone. And then I had to go make all new friends. It was horrible.
That is horrible.
And I just
and then you
remembered it now that you said that, because I didn't realize that was a form of bullying. Wow. Every time we do a podcast, all my stuff comes out. All right. So chapter 5 is nurturing confidence in children. How important is this? And can you go over how to do this?
Oh, I think self-confidence, and I don't know if you ladies maybe, I think it's the biggest self-protective factor you could probably have. Like if you're feeling good about yourself and strong about yourself, you're much more likely to take care of yourself and stand up for yourself and not let what other people say, do, get kind of in our head. You know, we have enough of our own automatic negative thoughts that we beat ourselves up over. We can't let other people's get in there. But when you are lacking confidence, you kind of take all that in like a sponge and it just becomes much worse. And then it just feeds what you're already thinking anyway. So I think self-confidence is huge. Kids who have self-confidence, teens who have self-confidence, they tend to get along with their peers, but they also tend to have great relationships with adults around them because they're not afraid to go up and just talk to an adult. So they tend to lead their life like it's okay for me to take up all this space and my opinion matters. And I think that's an important trait to have going out there in the world and dealing with
that
the
is
people we have to deal with.
Be able to communicate with adults in case someone is trying to bully you. At least you'll go tell an adult. You won't be afraid.
Yeah. And the more adults you have kind of in your world that know you, just the more eyes you have on that teen or that child, because now there's other people, you know, it's not just your parents or one teacher, but if you have kind of a relationship with a lot of different adults, there's lots of different people you can go to or that also just notice what's happening.
Yeah. And I wish my parents would have listened to a podcast like this and they just didn't know. I don't blame my parents. They just didn't know. And I didn't know how to handle it either.
No.
Yeah.
Well, in listening to a podcast, I heard a podcast a while back and they kind of said that it was some number like 70, 80% of current like adults don't really have the emotional regulation or the emotional intelligence of 8-year-olds, mostly because nobody ever talked to us about our emotions.
I did read that. I did hear that somewhere. Just read that somewhere.
Yeah. So
think of them as an 8-year-old.
Right. That's exactly it. I was like, oh, of course, nobody, you know, when I was in school, nobody ever like talked to us about our feelings or what to do with them. It was just like, just deal with it.
Definitely.
So I think having that, knowing that, and that confidence is a big part. I think there are things as parents that we kind of do to help it. I think recently COVID's kind of messed up a whole lot of things. And we're just now like digging ourselves out of that because there's a whole group of kids that didn't get play dates and they didn't get this whole interaction as young people before they went off even into school. And so that, you know, that's a huge part of toddlerness and little kidness is to just be able to play and interact and do soccer and do all those things because that's how you learn is from being around peers. And when we were isolated inside, we lost some of that. And I think that's having some lasting impact. That could be another podcast in and of itself. So definitely involving your kids in things is really important. Inviting them over, trying to get them to be around as many kids as they possibly can be. I have seen over the 20 plus years that I've been in school, kindergarten kids who come to school and do not really know. It takes them a long time to just figure out the rhythm. They're just waiting for people to tell them what to do all the time because they're never doing anything on their own, like not even able to eat their lunch because they don't know how to unwrap something. So all these little like tiny life skills that makes you feel like you're not very worthy when you're not, you know, you're watching all your other friends do these things and you don't know how to do it. So building those little independence that's age appropriate as they kind of grow and things that they can manage instead of as parents always doing it for them to make it easier. That builds confidence because it helps them know that they have the ability to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think building resiliency is a big thing. Life isn't always going to go our way. Yeah. And we have to know what to do when it doesn't go our way. In a way that isn't melting down the whole world. We have to have some way to bounce back from that and deal with that. When you're able to do that and you can see that in people who are really resilient and have overcome horrible things in their lives and done things, that builds eventually a bit of confidence because once you've done a hard thing, now you're like, I can do hard things. Like I did this hard thing. I can do any hard thing. And you know, you have that.
Yeah.
And I think as adults in the lives of children, modeling self-confidence because we watch what they do more than what they say a lot. And so are we standing up for ourselves and are we modeling that we're confident about this or I handled this well? How we show up in the world is really important because they're always watching us and seeing what we're doing. And we're there as parents, especially, but even as aunts and uncles, we're their role models all the time. Even when they're teenagers and think they don't need us as role models anymore, they're still watching what you're doing and how you interact in that situation and making all kinds of judgments. Sometimes whether right or wrong, they're always making judgments.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those were really good points for healing from trauma too, like the resilience and all that. But it is interesting. Our kids, we do need to set that model for them. And man, that's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. I think about how much I probably didn't do right, and that's okay.
That's okay.
And chapter 6, creating a supportive home base, which you kind of talked a little bit about. Can you go over the 6 steps? You talk about 6 ways you can strengthen the bond with your child through the power of communication.
Oh, yeah. So I always think that, even as adults, we all need that soft place to land, but especially kids. And home should be that, hopefully. We need a place where we can just go and be ourselves and be safe and have a reset. And home should be that. Showing a real interest. And this is sometimes very hard. And I'm guilty of this too. But being able to sometimes just put the phone down or turn the TV, like if your child is talking or your teen is telling you something, is being able to be fully present and listen to say what they're saying is important.
Mm-hmm.
I always think keeping them talking, because both of my kids, as they were growing up, they're in college now, but they never sat down and had a conversation necessarily when I wanted to have a conversation in a convenient time. It was always a not convenient time, like 11 o'clock at night or when I'm doing something else. But that's when they were saying the most important things I needed to listen to, because they know that they're just going to catch you off guard. It's the walk around the block. It's dropping somebody off at school. It's when everyone's going to bed and they're like, hey, can I tell you about this thing? And our first response would be like, no, go to bed. It's late.
Yeah.
But that's important things can come out, and we got to be just prepared to listen. And I think knowing that whatever they say and then following through with that, whatever you say is safe. We'll talk about it, and whether it's good or bad, there may be consequences and things we have to deal with, but it's safe for you to say what happened at school today, what happened online when you were playing games, what happened here, what happened there, that I'm going to listen and not just be reactive. But those are little messages that get built all along the way.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I remember with my kids, when you try to sit down and have an open heart conversation, they're not, it's hard to get it going, but then it'll be at moments that you're not expecting it. And that's when sometimes it's hard to take the time to stop. And I was also thinking about, I was a latchkey kid. So I would come home, both my parents worked, and I would come home from school, and I was a very shy child. So school was painful for me. I probably didn't get bullied a ton, but I did get bullied some. And when I get home from school, there would be nobody there to say, how was your day? I just learned to kind of, numb myself out or disconnect, because I'm just kind of dealing with some of that now and, going back and unpacking. It could be little T traumas. It's not big T traumas, but it's just little things like that can make a difference in just how you learn to communicate and have, like you're saying, have that confidence. If you don't have that, then it makes it difficult.
Yeah, that's so important what you said too, just to let them talk when they want to talk, when they're ready to talk. But I think I'm realizing with my kids as they're going through they're 20, they're older, they're 28, 25, and 23. But I think I came across as they felt like they couldn't tell me things. What causes that?
It's
should have just, instead of not being reactive, but just being more responsive to them.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. It's easy to look back and be like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that, because it is kind of hard. And nobody ever gives us a really good blueprint and parenting guide for getting through those things, or stopping when life is stressful and you got 8 million other things to do and you're already dealing with one kid's crisis and now this kid has something they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard thing to do. But I think giving kids early on the tools and the language to describe how they feel, say how they feel, be able to describe a situation, to notice your feelings, it starts there and can kind of build up. Because I think that is very common. A lot of kids just don't feel that they can say what they want to say. They're going to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be told they can't hang out with that person anymore. Their parents are going to overreact, whatever it is. And so they just don't say anything because they don't want it to get worse.
Mm.
I feel like an 8-year-old right now that's like, okay, I need to get in touch with my emotions. I never got past age 8. You're talking. She's saying such good stuff. I'm like, this is so good.
Oh, thank you.
So chapter 7 is From Hurt to Hope, helping your child overcome bullying. You list 8 steps. Can you expound on what you think is important to know?
Yeah. First, I think is
To be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.